So we just found this software this week and we're excited, right? So welcome to our show, everybody. Got my good friend, Adam Kerrigan here today, one of my buddies that I've met kind of in the industry. And Adam's had a great journey and we've just kind of gotten to know each other by going to some of these tech shows together. So I'm really excited to interview him today. So, Adam, just why don't you give us your elevator pitch? What do you guys do?
Yeah, Sam, super good to see you again, brother. Looking forward. I think I'll be out in Tampa in a couple of weeks, so we'll get some more time together
Really?
in person. Yeah, for the IT
Well,
Nation
you
Grow.
want to
But
ride?
I don't
You
know
want
if
to
my knees
ride?
can put. I don't know if my knees can put up with that. But
Really?
yeah,
Well, we've
but
got bikes.
yeah,
I was going to ask you, man. I've got two
yeah,
XLs and I've got two larges. So you're a big guy.
I might take you up on that.
You should.
Yeah,
I'll be at
but
the
yeah,
same show. When you
super
fly
good.
in?
I believe I'm flying in Monday,
Okay.
but I'll have to double check my schedule.
And Adam's talking about the
Yeah.
Evolve M&A conference, which
hmm
Arlen Sorensen's done an amazing job. My mind was blown when we were there in February. So I'm totally stoked to see this next show. So, all right, give us your
Yeah,
pitch,
but
man.
anyway,
What do you do?
yeah, super glad to be here. So, my story probably is very similar to a lot of the MSP owners out there, where I spent the first 10 years of my career in corporate IT, and then in 2009, my department was eliminated because of the Great Recession, and so I started my own MSP, and I grew it for 10 years, and just started as myself and kind of grew it up. And after 10 years, I was really struggling. I was burned out. I was struggling to find good people, especially in sales and marketing. And I was just frankly grinding to get to the next revenue level. So in 2018, those are some of the reasons that led to my decision to partner and sell my MSP to Intelligent Technical Solutions, also based here in Las Vegas, where I'm at. And, 6 years later, here I am. I feel like I made a fairly good decision because, well, I lost 80 pounds. I got out of a
Nice.
bad marriage. I got my nights and weekends back. I started my
Wow.
hobby of competitive powerlifting
Wow.
and really along the way became, I really reclaimed happiness for myself and am
Wow.
more financially secure. I do admit, however, I know not everyone is suffering like I was, but I just celebrated 6 years now, just a couple of months ago, or I'm sorry, just a few weeks ago. And it's been a pretty spectacular ride. And I've got an update for the next chapter because
Ooh, I
not a lot of
like
people
that.
know I'm actually getting ready to move on to my own next chapter. I'll be leaving ITS here in a week.
Wow. Well, I know they're probably grateful to have you on board. And so it makes me think of a lot of things, right? So last time we talked, we were down in Miami and
hmm
and I think want to get into your story a little bit more in just a few minutes.
Yeah,
But you and I have been traveling, right? So we had two pretty important tech conferences for MSPs back to back.
yeah.
So I saw you down in Miami at DattoCon, right? We got to hear
hmm
Fred speak, the CEO. Fred, is it Vacola?
Yeah,
Vacola
Fred Vicola. Yep, of Kaseya.
of
hmm
Kaseya. And then right behind it was IT Nation. And I don't know about you, man, it was really interesting to see them back to back, right?
Yeah.
Two totally different cultures. I was impressed with Kaseya. I just seen them kind of coming along. They've
hmm
been kind of putting companies together like Arnie did for years with ConnectWise. But I was like, are they just mashing things together? And, you know, when they bought Datto, I think it took them to the next level. But I was impressed with what he had to say, and he was in our M&A seminars too. And I
hmm
felt like he really related to the audience and he is very real. Like he talked about
Yeah.
all the challenges with integration and things like that. But I
hmm
thought it was a drastic difference between just the culture and maybe it's just being Miami versus Orlando. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I agree with you. I think, Kaseya in the MSP industry is very polarizing. People seem to either love them or hate them.
What's that? Why do you think?
Well, I guess not to get too far off track, I
Uh-huh.
think it's so funny to me because MSPs, we love to get our clients into 3-year agreements and,
Right.
and, uh,
Yes.
and I think we share a similarity. Like Kaseya is very similar. They want to get people into 3-year agreements. I think
Yeah.
the difference is that MSPs, because they're smaller businesses, they
Mhm.
kind of tend to, hey, if somebody wants out of a contract, there's usually a little bit of give and take. And I know that one of the big turnoffs for people when it comes to Kaseya is they're very rigid about, hey, you want out of your contract, you got to pay full price. And so that can be tough. for a small business to cope with. But
Now they just changed that, didn't they? They at least came up with like, what is it, catastrophic failure? I don't know if you know about that, but yeah. So there are some out clauses now,
they're
and
easing up.
they'll
That's
allow
good.
you to, I think what they call it, like revenue trade or something like that. So
Yeah,
if
you
you've
can
got a deal,
shift
yeah,
the
revenue
spend.
shift.
Yeah,
So
you
it's
get
worked for
creative.
us.
The marketing people probably came up with that one. But I will tell you actually something I do admire about Kaseya. And Fred is very upfront about what their culture is. Like, I know, again, this is another polarizing thing is kind of the work from home environment, but he's very clear, like, no, if every company we acquire, our team, we are in office. Now, people might not like that. I mean, I work from home, but I do like their transparency and I respect them for that.
Good. Yeah, yeah. I
So,
know it's worked
but,
for our rep.
but
So
yeah,
you
with,
kind of see both. But I tell you what, when I got there, I thought, well, it's a pretty unified team. It was
mm-hmm,
a much more intimate audience. I think he said there was maybe 2,000 people there versus
mm-hmm,
5,000 in
yeah.
Orlando at IT Nation. But I was just really impressed. I mean, what are your thoughts about his comments and just kind of, how they're trying to bundle things for the channel? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I guess a couple of things there. One is the roll up play, right? I think they announced they had acquired SaaS alerts, if I
Mm-hmm.
remember
Mm-hmm.
correctly,
Yeah.
and they have, their strategy is to actually do these acquisitions and then sometimes announce them like years later. I think there's definitely some pluses to that. I know their product, they announced, Kaseya 365. So in my view, I'm like, yeah, they're trying to become like the Microsoft for MSPs, right? They want everything. In fact, I was just talking with somebody yesterday, an M&A prospect, and they were saying, hey, Adam, I don't know, I know I'll save some money if I move to this, but I'm worried because I'm looking to sell my company. And then like, what if I'm locked into this agreement? And then the acquirer is going to have to deal with that. I basically gave him the same advice I give everybody is if you're considering selling your business, there's going to be decisions that come up. Maybe it's hiring or expanding or, deploying a new service or something like this or changing vendors. My advice to people is always run your business as though you're going to keep it because more than
Okay.
likely you are.
Okay.
And, and then the reality is if you can sign as short a term of agreement as you can, try to go for maybe a 1 year or even a month to month. I know, again, we were just talking about that. Our vendors are just like us. They want long-term contracts because that raises their valuation as
Right.
a company. But, try to, maybe there's some compromise there. And the worst case scenario is if you've got to sign that 3 year, that long-term agreement, it actually becomes the acquirer's problem. And
Mm-hmm.
and I've actually never seen a deal fall through. Not saying it's never happened, but I've never seen a deal fall through because, hey, why'd you sign this 3 year agreement with a vendor?
Yeah.
That just doesn't come up.
Right.
So once I explained that to him, he felt a lot better. And I think he'll feel a little bit better about, hey, I could drive up my profitability. I'm going to run as though I'm going to keep the business, even though I'm planning to sell. And it gets him in a good headspace.
That's good, man. I like it. Well, I like them as a vendor. I was a little rocky when they first acquired Datto because we're a big
Mm,
Datto partner.
yeah.
So I think things have gotten a lot better over the last couple of years. So what are your thoughts, seeing those conferences back to back? What are your thoughts on leadership? And I know Jason just stepped down at
Yeah.
ConnectWise.
Yeah, so I attended both the M&A day for Kaseya and I found it interesting because I was my understanding is there was zero M&A sessions. Everything M&A focus was all on one day. It was just
On
on that
which conference?
pre-day for Kaseya at
Okay.
DataCon. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah, so at DataCon there was everything that was talked about M&A was all concentrated on one day. And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. I've noticed this trend that I get a sense from people that there's beginning to be some M&A burnout. It's such a like in your face topic, right? You really struggle to go anywhere. Even peer groups are talking about it all the time. So I think they wanted to condense it and then focus on the typical stuff, sales, marketing, operations for the conferences.
Nice.
But then the size like was obviously apparent. Like if you visited the vendor area for DataCon, it was a fair vendor area. I mean, there
Mm-hmm.
might have been 100 vendors or whatever. But then the next week at IT Nation, it was massively larger, right? You walked in and
Like
I mean,
5 times,
yeah, it's like 5 times the size
like a
and
warehouse.
it just blew it away. Yeah, it was really like walking into a warehouse.
Is that a good thing though? I mean, I like the
Yeah.
intimacy at Kaseya. And I got some really good conversations going on the vendor
Hmm.
floor just with other MSPs.
Yeah. I think there's pros and cons to it.
Uh-huh.
Again, was having a conversation just the other day with somebody. If I'm going to a smaller conference, it's easier to find the people that I'm looking for, right? I
Mm,
probably have a better sense of
right.
who's going to be there, right? Whether it's maybe a former peer or just an industry friend, something like that. But I'm probably, and this is a trend that I have noticed because like I've been attending more and more conferences. I see that if you go to just say Kaseya conferences, it
Mhm.
kind of tends to be the same circle of people.
Yep.
And so you got to get outside that. And I think that's an upside of some of the bigger, like to my knowledge, IT Nation in November is the biggest MSP conference of the entire year, right? And so you go there, it's a lot of new people, but it's also not just MSP owners and CEOs. They're bringing their technicians and they're bringing, their marketing people. I mean, last year we at ITS, we took like 22 people from all kinds. And we actually used it as an opportunity to do a annual strategy session. We had all of our
Great.
partners come out. We had all of our whole leadership team. And
Love that.
I think it's a great area to kind of do that together. Orlando's definitely set up better for conventions. DataCon last year, they actually had to spread it across 3 different hotels, was kind of a pain in the rear end. This year now it was just at 2, so it was a
Uh-huh.
little bit easier instead of like these, the shuttle that was going in a triangle. You just went back and forth, but yeah, it's good. There's pros and cons.
So those are two big conferences, right? I would think MSPs would want to go and are attracted to. But what are you doing the rest of the year? Because right, you're trying to size up. You've got a nice M&A strategy.
Yeah,
You said what, 17, 18 companies
yeah,
have come
yeah,
together?
yeah. Good memory. Yeah. So in total, we've done 17. In the last 2.5 years, I've brought in 9 transactions. So 9 of those 17 have come in. Fantastic partners. I want to say, yeah, actually, all of them are on the West Coast, all the way from Washington down to California and
Yeah, it was
Arizona.
funny at ConnectWise. You were like, yeah, I think Florida's like another country,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It kind of is, right. And you start to
especially
see
with
that.
3 time zones
Yeah, yeah. It's far enough
difference.
away that it's a little bit different. East Coast, West Coast,
Hmm.
South, right? We all kind of have our own cultures a little bit. Uh,
So what
but
other
yeah.
conferences, if you're looking to meet other MSPs, where do you go?
Oh, sure. So the big four are, we talked about IT Nation and Connect, Datacon, but then Kaseya Connect, which is in April, and they tend to hold it every year in Las Vegas. And then one that I have actually not yet been to is the PAX 8 conference in Denver.
Oh, yeah, I've heard good things
Well,
about
for
that.
the last 2 years, I planned to go, and I had an overlapping conference at another smaller conference I was speaking at. Aside from that, there's a number of other conferences. You've got Robin Robbins Technology Marketing Toolkit, which word on the street is Kaseya has bought her,
Yeah.
not yet been made public, is my understanding.
Okay.
There's smaller groups. You've got like TBG Taylor Business Group. You've
Mhm.
got Chartech out in
Right.
Bakersfield.
Right.
You have Pro Tier. So that then there's the big ones, and then it kind of starts coming down to smaller and smaller. And then you even have regional ones like ASCII and uh, all kinds of little ones that pop up all over the place. So
That's great,
there's
man.
there's I think there's now over 300 conferences, and it's now to the point like we were just talking about this M&A Nation in Tampa. It is a conference that is dedicated strictly to M&A. That is how pervasive this topic is. So
So now you think there's some burnout. Is that with the discussion among MSPs? Because it seems like there's all this more momentum. So a couple of comments that I've heard,
yeah,
like from service leadership, you'll hear that there's about 35,000 MSPs across the US. And then Fred said he has 140,000 on a contact list, but
probably
you know,
worldwide, I'm guessing.
probably worldwide. All right.
Yeah.
So if you kind of look at the addressable marketplace for what other, I guess, roll ups, if I call you guys that, what you're looking for, maybe in that 3 to 5 million, maybe 7 to 10 million, are those two different groups? And then what's the addressable market, do you think, of people that want to be acquired?
Yeah. So if we just focus on just the US, because I would say that's at least where my kind of expertise is at. Yeah, the general thinking is there's somewhere between 30 and 40,000 overall MSPs. And yeah, from Fred's comments, I can recall one of his slides in particular that said of all MSPs, 1% annually are involved in an M&A transaction. And then I want to say that annually, somewhere between like 7 and 8% of overall revenue of the industry is involved. So it kind of gives you like, hey, it's really just a tiny pie. But the reality is it creates shockwaves for other people. Like as an example, the increase in competition, right? It drives people to want to make moves, right? And kind of do it themselves. What we have seen historically is private equity is driving a lot of this, right? And we could get into the reasons why, but the reality is these guys make money better than anybody. And they've identified the MSP market, right? We have recurring revenue, which is super sticky with clients. We have great profitability. And so they're coming in big time. They're bringing all this money in. And they've typically invested in companies that were doing at least 5 million of EBITDA. So companies that were probably doing like 20 million of revenue, 25 million of revenue, and then they would buy that company, would become their platform, and then they would buy nothing smaller than 1 million of EBITDA, somebody doing 5 million of revenue plus. Well, the challenge is all those opportunities, they're all bought up, right? There's very few people. And again, Fred even talked about this. There's been a reduction in the amount of transactions because there's just fewer assets on the market. And so what that does is it means that everybody's going down market, meaning they're looking at smaller and smaller assets. So that's one. So you've got all these private equity firms that are trying to get in, they're trying to deploy their money into the industry, and there's very little. So they're going smaller and smaller. And then second is the people that are below, say, 3 million of revenue. They've been historically ignored, right? They're kind of flying under the radar. They're not making enough profitability to get the attention of the big acquirers, whether it's a platform like us or a private equity company. Well, these guys are smart, right? They see the multiples of EBITDA, the valuation that these bigger guys are getting, and they're like, hey, I don't want to miss out. I want to partake in this, right? And so what they're doing is they're coming together, right? They're turning into buyers themselves, and they're saying, hey, Sam, I've been in this peer group with you for 5-10 years. I trust you. You trust me. Our families have met, whatever. Let's come together. I'm 3 million, you're 3 million. Now we're 6 million. It lifts our value, and then we go to market. And we're starting to see more and more of that. And I've had conversations with people as small as just a few 100,000 of revenue that are looking to get into that. It's a great theory on paper. It's much more difficult in practice.
What do you think the big challenges are with that? Because it does. Everybody can kind of get excited and go, okay, we're going to take advantage of the arbitrage of our profitability coming together. But you're right. I mean, 4 or 5, it'll be tough to do it with just one other person. The two of you go to market. I can't imagine trying to wrestle 3, 4, or 5 companies at one time.
So I think there's a couple of challenges. The first one is, look, I'm a big believer the number one challenge, not only in the MSP industry, but in all of business, is new client sales, right? It is the hardest thing is to sign new clients. And so I find that there's this trend of MSP owners who have struggled to figure out the sales solution, right? And kind of become systematic at it, and let alone scale it. And they've done everything they can. They've gone to Chartec, they've gone to Robin Robbins, they've done this and they've done that, right? They've read everything out there, and they're just not good at it. That's kind of where I was personally. I was like, man, I'm throwing all this money at the wall and it's not sticking. And they get burned out on trying to solve it. And then suddenly this shiny object called M&A, and they're like, oh, let me focus over here, right? It's a welcome distraction, right, from running the business and all this other stuff. And they're thinking, you know what? I'm going to solve my sales problem. I'm going to solve my growth problem by acquiring somebody else. Really what it does, and now it just doubles your problem. Now you've got your own region, which is struggling with sales, and you just bought a company that is also struggling with sales, and you've doubled your problem. That's the first thing. The second thing is that in MSPs, there are these ceilings that people have to break through. The first one's like 500,000 or 1 million of revenue, and then it's 2 to 3 million, and then 5, and then 10. And at each level, there are certain things that have to get figured out. Like as an example, at the 2 to 3 million revenue mark, that's about the point where word of mouth marketing kind of peaks, right? It's just like, hey, Adam, we don't even do any marketing. We just do good service. And so people refer us. But that seems to be the point where the client losses kind of even out with the client wins. And so people can't really get past that. Well, what happens is, let's say you now doubled up, right? You and another peer come together, you're both 2 or 3 million. Well, now you're at 5 million. Well, there are completely different challenges that you're going to face. And when you're at 5 million, the challenge becomes to build out an internal leadership team. And if you haven't even figured out how to fix your sales problem, now you're compounding it by adding on layers. And that really becomes, one of my concerns. I will say this, I see a lot of people talking about it. I actually met with somebody, they're actually looking at 3 MSPs to come together, and they want to all come together. They're going to actually be a little bit more than 10 million of revenue all combined. But their plan is then to immediately sell to somebody else. So they're kind of like dodging the bullet, Neo in the Matrix sort of a thing. I'm very curious to see how this works out for them.
Well, it makes sense. We've kind of walked through these scenarios with other competitors that we're friendly with. And the big challenge became like, well, if we're merging first, and you and I talked about this down in Miami.
Yeah.
If you're merging first, then you have all those challenges of who's going to take on what role. Does that work? Is the chemistry right? And, or do you immediately start to kill each other, and try to extricate partners and things like that. So at least you can kind of move very quickly towards, well, M&A kind of takes over. And what I see is you still are staying as an owner operator of that group of employees and clients that you have. And then you and I had this conversation because you were like, well, what would make them more valuable is if they all integrated first and then were bought. But how does that even happen if you don't have these roles worked out and you're just buddies and all of a sudden now everybody's reporting to each other? And
for sure.
Right. So I think that, and I've talked to some of these bigger roll-ups and they said, no, we'd really just like come together. We'll acquire all of you, and then you integrate once. Because, what you and I were talking about, I was thinking about this later. I thought, well, I should have said this to Adam. Are you really going to get the integration done? If that really is interesting, right? Because they want to try to, stay together for a year or two, and then they're going to try to integrate again. Man, we've assimilated 7 or 8 companies into our group. It is hard work. It is hard to do. I can't imagine doing it twice.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest appeal. And this group that I was talking with, I kind of said to him, hey, historically, those who perform the integration, because as you rightly said, it's the difficult work, they're getting that uplift of value. And he said, well, actually, I guess as they've been testing the market, what you said is what they've been being told is, hey, instead of integrating twice and therefore jeopardizing kind of the churn of the employees and the churn of the clients, let's just do it together. You guys 3 come under paper together and then we'll buy you. Now, what I actually am curious to see, and I have zero data about this, is these are the kind of the pre-transaction prices, right, that they're getting quoted. I'm curious to truly see, are they actually getting the same value? It's different to hear it, and it's different to see it on a piece of paper that you're looking to sign an LOI or a purchase agreement or something like that. So look, if people can do it, if they can get around it, fantastic. I can only look historically and say, hey, here's what we've seen be successful. But yeah, we've done 17 integrations.
That's amazing. I mean,
tough.
You're in it. Yeah, you're in it. 6 years now. So what's one of the more interesting ones that you've had?
Wow. Well, the first one that comes to mind is one we did 2 years ago, where the owner, he let us know very much up front, hey, I'm gonna leave. But he said, hey, I don't want anyone to know that. This was a red flag. And silly us, we went along with it. I think this was actually transaction number 10 overall. And we're like, well, we'll sort it out. He's like, I don't want my team. I don't want my clients. I don't want anybody to know. Like, as far as everybody's concerned, it's business as usual. And we made the silly decision, right, to ignore this red flag. So, and then so we signed the LOI, we're in negotiations, and he's like, hey, I don't want to stick around for a year. I want to stick around for 6 months. And we're like, wait a second, so we settled on 9, right? So then we closed the deal, right? He has the money, everything else. And we announced that he's going to stay, right? And this is all a big learning experience for us. Well, he had what I called short timer syndrome. 2 months in, he's out. He leaves, right? And we're like, wait a second. First, we wanted a year. You said 6 months. He's like, sorry, guys, I'm out. Well, and then we had to go back to all the clients and we had to announce to all the team that we're leaving, right? And that broke trust, right? Because the team is like, wait a second, right? The clients are like, wait a second, you guys said that he was going to stay. How can we trust anything that you say now, right? And that's understandable. It was a big mistake on our part to go ahead with that. Huge learning experience. And so now it's been kind of a learning insight of like, look, if somebody's going to depart, we're going to tell people up front, hey, here's who's leaving, here's who's staying. And even if they don't want to hear it, they might be upset by it, but at least they can trust it and they know that that's what's to be expected.
Right. It reminds me of a seminar like 10 years ago when Arnie Bellini was still at ConnectWise, and you could go to his M&A seminar. And he said one of the main things you're going to have to do, I don't know if it was him or one of the speakers he had, he said, it's like psychology, right? You've got to sit down with this owner or a group of owners, and you have to sort through what's next. And it's so interesting that that's what it comes down to. No matter how big or small, I find myself in those conversations, and I guess I'm good at it, but it's hard, right? No matter how good you think you are, you have the experience like what you had. But I can remember challenging one of the owners at one point saying, wait a minute, what do you want to do? You want to come in as a VCIO, you want to have this big role, but you just got through telling me you've been kind of an absent owner for the last 3 years. Wait, so I'm missing something. What'd you do during those 3 years? And he told me he was very involved in another organization. And I go, why don't you just pursue that? And he goes, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, isn't it? I'm sure you're in that conversation all the time.
Yeah. I think it's a mixture of a few things. One is the sellers, in my experience, what they don't want to do is they don't want to disappoint the buyer. And so they kind of overcommit, like, hey, I'll do this because I want to get this deal done, right? They want to get out, so they'll say whatever. And even part of it, I even went through that journey. When I sold mine, I was going to lead our tech team. And I knew this beforehand, but 2 months in, I was like, I'm done. I'm done closing tickets. I'm tired of climbing under desks, that sort of thing, right? And so I went to Tom and I was like, dude, I made a huge mistake. And he's like, oh my God, are you saying you want your company back? And I was like, no, I'm not saying that, right? But I'm done with ops. I got to do something different. And I think this is a very common problem and actually it holds people back from even doing transaction, even when they should, is they fail to know what it is that they want to do next, right? And we can change our minds, but I really question, are people putting in the time? Are they putting in, just kind of getting by themselves and sitting down and saying, hey, what do I want to do? What do I enjoy? And a lot of times when people are pressed and they give an honest answer, it's like, I don't know. I've done everything because I had to. I haven't even had the luxury to think about it.
Interesting. So then so how long does that take? Because you think about transactions and doing deals, it's an investment of time. So if you meet a guy in January, you have these conversations, he thinks he's interested, he or she, but then what? How much time goes by? Is it a few months where they're sorting it out? And then at what point, that's what I wanted to ask you today. Like, what do you feel like is the average deal length for a healthy deal? And then at what point do you go, look, man, you're just not ready. You're just making this too difficult. We just have we're not coming together because you're just not ready.
Yeah. In my experience, most MSP owners, they are resistant to move too far into the process until they kind of feel this like sense of direction, right? And this peace of mind about what they're going to do. And like we have some of the transactions we've closed, I want to say that the shortest from when we actually initially met the people to when we closed the deals, this was one that had come through a broker. And so we had no prior existing relationship. We just met there. We just got an email blast, right? Like, hey, this asset's coming on the market. We closed that deal in like less than 4 months, right? That's extremely short. The longest, though, is over 3 years from when we first had our first conversation on the topic to what it took to build the relationship. And so everybody, in my view, is kind of on their own journey. Some people are more pragmatic. Some people have no idea. Actually, just this year, we had to walk away from 2 deals where the owners they took so much time to kind of finally make a decision. This is actually now a big problem that I see, where they've been distracted. I talked about this shiny object, M&A, right? And then what happens is they become distracted and they take their foot off the gas of sales, right? Their pipeline dries up. They don't even think about it. And like, hey, business is good. I'm growing every single year. And then suddenly they're debating and they take like a year or more to make a decision. Am I going to M&A? Am I going to do it right now? Am I a buyer? Am I a seller? What am I going to do?
Right.
And I get it, right? There's a lot to consider, right? Our whole identity is interwoven with this thing.
Yeah.
Well,
True.
the sad thing is they started losing clients after they made a decision. Hey, yes, I'm going to move forward. They started losing clients. Their growth starts slowing. Their profitability starts drying up. And then boom, they're in the middle of collecting LOIs, right? They're soliciting for offers and their growth is tanking and they can't do anything, right, to fix it overnight. And so we as an organization, even though we spent years building these relationships, we said, hey, sorry, go back, rebuild, do your sales, kind of get your sales pipeline going, right? We kind of showed them, hey, here's the path of how to do business with us. We were their number one pick in both cases. And the challenge is they were so emotionally hooked. They're like, I've spent over a year. I'm not going back. Like, I'm selling my company. I don't care. I'm just selling. And they literally lost millions of dollars because of the downturn in their value. But they were so hooked, they had to sell right then. It's kind of a tragedy in my view.
Interesting. Yeah. Boy, it is very emotional. Right? It's draining for both parties.
Yeah.
So this is cool, man. You've been doing this for 6 years. I like that you talk about Tom. Y'all are very close. And
Yeah.
there was this role in service operations you thought you were going to do, but now you're running the M&A. So what did that look like? That's so cool, man.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I went after that initial 2 weeks, of being on the ops side, I went over to sales. And for me, this is something I honestly love about ITS is it's such a fantastic culture. I spoke earlier about kind of investing in myself and doing all this training and coaching and everything. And I needed what I found was the right environment to be planted in. And for me, that was at ITS. I had a great mentor and friend, Matt Phillips, who is, he's still with the organization. He kind of took me under his wing, helped coach me up. And so for 3 years, I was just doing outside sales and I became the most productive salesperson for 3 years. And then Tom came to me in 2021 and he's like, hey, Adam, we really want to start ramping up this M&A thing. What would you think about taking that and just starting the division and running it? And I was like, dude, I'd love that. I felt like the poster child, right? So we started doing that. We did a 3-way merger right away. We brought on private equity and then we did this string of transactions. So for me,
now wait a minute, a 3-way merger with what organization?
Yeah. So in October of 21, we were about 10 million of revenue and we did a 3-way merger with San Francisco and Detroit. And we came together and that brought us to about 22 million of revenue. And then just a few months later.
It is possible then.
It is possible. It is possible. Yes. And so we let the dust settle.
Successful?
Well, I think it's because we had done 7 transactions before, right? So this was simultaneously like transaction number 8 and 9. So we started integrating. Now, don't get me wrong, it was the longest integration. It took us about a year, but then culturally it took us like 24 months because it was such a massive thing to come together. And I think actually I just finished a book, which actually has been fantastic for me, Transitions. I took so many notes in this book.
Nice.
In any transition, there is an end. There's like this neutral zone in the middle and then a beginning. And I think what we took too long at, why it took us almost 2 years for a cultural thing, is we failed to say, hey, the old is dead. Like to actually call it out. I think we were a little bit too patient with just letting things kind of organically go away. But anyway, not to get off the topic, but
Oh,
Yeah. So
that's
we went to
right
private
on
equity.
topic. I love it.
Yeah. But yeah, so that we did that. And then, I've kind of grown that, and I've really found for myself, like kind of this passion. I see, having gone through the process myself, I see these owners struggling, right? And kind of selling and navigating their business. And then they're navigating that interim period of like, hey, what am I going to do? And observationally, I believe that 9 out of 10 MSP owners that sell their company, they're too small to just simply sell and retire, right? That, and so what they do is they do this thing called the second bite of the apple, where they sell to a bigger MSP, they roll in part of their equity, right? They stick around for a couple of years. And there's this nuance, right? We've been running our companies for decades. Now we got to take that CEO hat off, right? We got to give up control. We got to give up the power, the title, and everything else. We got to become an employee. And for 2 to 5 years, we're involved with this company and we are aimless, right? We're like a rudderless ship, and it's navigating that. And these guys are struggling. There's thousands of books written about how to start up a company, but almost nothing written about how to exit a company.
So,
And that is where I found what I'm feeling passionate about in my career, and even in my personal life now, is I want to do something to help fix that. I don't know what yet, but I want to help people navigate that. And so that's part of my own transition plan, is to get into a place where I can help more of these sellers.
love that. And I'm sitting here thinking, who knows if I would be a good employee or not. We've run Big Sur for 25 years, but I would like to think I would be. I would like to think I'm a team guy and I could handle it. But you're right. I guess, it's been, I think one of the main things that I heard when I was starting the company is don't have partners. And there was a part of me that really wanted to go in with other people. I don't know if it's like an insecurity thing or immaturity
Sure.
thing. You just think there's power in numbers. But it seemed like every single person I talked to said, don't have partners, man, because you're going to end up breaking up and it's going to
Yeah.
be messy. Go it alone. If you can generate revenue, you'll figure everything else out. I'm like, all right. It took a long time to get it off the ground. And so the reason I'm saying that is maybe because I've had executive power. Do you think that's what it is, that you don't really have to belabor decisions? Why do you think that why does a former owner go adrift, especially if let's say they're maybe a hard worker? Do they not find their sweet spot?
Well, I think there's two things.
Or is it leadership? Like, it seems like you've been mentored where you are. Like you mentioned Tom
Sure.
and this other gentleman, and like, so they kept like, hey, Adam, let me try this and try that. They were behind you. They didn't go,
Sure.
well, he's confused. Let's
He's
just
on his
fire
own.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's two aspects there. First and foremost, like in general, MSP owners are men, right? And so, this is a thing we gave birth to, right? More than likely, we started it from scratch. It's blood, sweat, and tears that we poured into. This is our baby, right? And it's also
Right.
interwoven with our identity. We've got CEO on our business card. We walk into a room.
Yep.
We bring all the credibility, all the power, all the control, all the decisions, for better or worse, come up to us, right? And we're used to that role, right? That is our identity. And then overnight, we sign that transaction paperwork, we get the money wired in, and that evaporates. We are no longer the owner, right? And so our whole identity changes overnight. And this is a big problem in any transaction that I've ever seen, is there's almost nothing done to recognize that, let alone help a person navigate through. Because literally, let's say you sell on a Friday afternoon, Monday morning, you're expected to just start helping with integration, start helping, but you still got to run your segment, right? You got to help with your team, and you got to help them navigate the whole change. Like, everybody's identity changes overnight, and there's almost nothing done to help you navigate that psychological and emotional and mental change.
Arlen talks about it all the time. Like, he's made it his mission. Maybe you should talk to him. I know, he's in it. He talks about, like, a lot of the owners, hey, we're pals, how's it going? Like, I'm depressed.
Yeah.
They don't really know what to do with themselves.
Yeah, it's literally part of it. Like, and this is what I was saying earlier, is in any transition, there's an ending, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this neutral zone where you kind of navigate, like the transition, and then there is a beginning. And what happens is in our system, like if you think back to kind of say, hey, the indigenous people of it, really anywhere, like, Native Americans is an example,
Right.
right? They had this ceremony, kind of a becoming of a man, where the young man goes off and he kind of goes off on his own and he comes back as a man, right? And that's just kind of the stereotypical ancient civilization practice. We don't do that in our society. There's none of that. And we're expected to have an ending and immediately begin. And there's no time to navigate that. And actually in myself, so reading this book, one of the things that I'm personally doing is when I end my time at ITS, I'm actually going to go off camp for 3 days by myself, no cell phone, cook my food over fire, live in a tent, and then completely cut off contact and just be with myself, right? Sit there in the moment, record any thoughts that I have, but just be out in nature and kind of reset, and then come back and then start with this investment bank the very next week. Not saying it's going to be enough, or maybe it's too much or not enough, but it's something specific that I'm doing to celebrate an end and then prepare for a beginning, and just give myself some time,
I
give
love
myself
that.
some isolation.
That's awesome, man. Some cultures or some people do it. So I think the Jewish folks, they have the bar mitzvah,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Oh, yeah.
and I think the Latino culture has the quinceañera, maybe
Yep. Quinceañera. Yep. Yep.
quinceañera. So we do a little bit of it, but not enough. I would totally agree
Yeah.
with that. So, man, what's going on? Like, how did you decide that your time here with what you've been doing is kind of wrapping up? Did you feel like you
Yeah.
got a lot of it that you could? And then why investment banking? What's going on?
So something I discovered about myself later in life, as my own identity was kind of becoming revealed to me, is I found that I'm extremely competitive. And that kind of came out of me getting into competitive powerlifting. And even though we had 8, 9 wins these last 2 years, for me, it wasn't enough. I'm still hungry. And one of the challenges in fairness is ITS, being at ITS, as fantastic as a company as it is, it's really only one solution. And working for a buyer, that's the only product, right, that I can sell. And I see an opportunity to be on the other side of the table, right, helping the sellers navigate the landscape, right, and navigate this transaction. And one of the challenges historically is, there's a lot of advisors, there's a lot of companies out there, brokers and so forth, that help people sell their business. But one of the problems is there's those people went to school to learn how to do this, right? And what most of them lack is personal experience. Most of them have never sold their own company. And so one of the things that's really appealed to me is finding a firm where I can kind of bring my experience, my empathy to the forefront. And that's what I did. I found a company that the only deal makers they hire are entrepreneurs who have founded and exited their own firms.
Interesting.
And we
Okay.
only work with sellers. And so for me, it eliminates the bias, right? A lot of the consultants and advisors out there, they work with both sides. I feel there's too much bias there. So I want to go somewhere where I can maximally leverage my empathy, and there's zero bias. I'm only working with sellers. And I found a fantastic company, and they're based out of Seattle. It's called Quorum.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've heard of
Quorum Group.
Quorum. Yeah, just
So
recently
yeah,
gotten exposed to them. They sound great. They sound
yeah. So
very organized. A lot
so
of
I
platform.
correct. Yeah. So it was founded by a former tech owner. That's the only industry they focus on is technology, of which IT services is about a tenth of it. But they focus on software and IP, data center, cloud, really the whole gamut of IT, or of technology. So the concept of being able to help these people navigate, right, kind of being a Sherpa as this individual's making his first ascent up Mount Everest, right? All right, you know what, guys, the wind's blowing this way. We're going to camp here for the night. Or, hey, all right, we got to make our push for the summit, right? The sun's out. We're good, right? The temperature's right. I want to help people go through that process over and over. And I want to help them find what is right for them, and then bring empathy to the process. Like everybody's got to figure out what is next for them. That is a very personal journey. And frankly, I think truly it's only experienced when you're in it. I think you can work ahead of time, but you've got to go through it. Just as you had said with the gentleman that he's got some plans, he's got to figure that out when it happens. That's what I'm excited. And so that's the route I'm headed with my career.
So when you say that you kind of self-discovery, competition, and empathy, so how does that play into the new role? What does that mean?
Yeah. So I think if what brings people together are problems, right? That's why you can sit at a bar and I don't know if you've ever been divorced. I have, but if somebody's there and there's a guy and somehow he's venting about his divorce, we instantly have a bond, right? Because we've gone through that same
Right.
problem, that same challenge, or even having kids or having an MSP owner, right? That's why peer groups work so well, is we're all experiencing the
Yeah.
same problem. Problems are what bring people together. So I've been through that process, right? Personally, I don't have an MBA, right? I'm not a spreadsheet jockey. I didn't go to school to learn this. I learned it the hard way by going through it. I want to help navigate. I want to help guide somebody through that. Another great book called Finish Big by
Show me.
Burlingham.
You
Yeah, let
got
me
it
show
there?
you here. This one, again, I got more notes on it. Fantastic book. Bo interviewed like 80 business owners who had exited their business. And one of the threads that he found of the people who are the most successful after they exit, which is kind of where I'm at, is they find in their own unique way, a way and a method to continue to serve people.
Okay.
They are the happiest. They are truly the ones that are the most successful. And so for me, I've done that internal work of saying, hey, where do I get satisfaction? Why do I even like this M&A stuff? And I realized it's helping people achieve what I achieved myself, right? Getting through that fire to the next chapter, again, figuring out what's right for me. And so I want to help kind of be the guide to help navigate and get people to the next side.
I love that. The Sherpa.
Yeah.
That's cool, man. So what does it look like at Quorum? How are they structured? How big are they? How do they plug
Yeah.
in?
Yeah. So I'm going to be learning some of that myself here in the coming weeks. I've got one more week with ITS. I'll be starting in December with Quorum, but they've got roughly 150 people. They've got about 40 what they call points. They take point. They're deal makers. These are founders, former founders, entrepreneurs, and those who have exited from their own tech company. And honestly, it's such an exciting appeal for me is to be able to work with elite people. Like in my powerlifting training, I only train with elite people. Something I don't like to boast about it, but I'm a 4-time national champion. I'm a 1-time world champion. I hold currently a world deadlift record.
Kidding.
And so the people that I train with are elite. I work very hard to surround myself with that in my personal and my work life. And so I cannot tell you how excited I am to be able to jump in this kind of brother and sisterhood of entrepreneurs in the tech industry and really come in there. I just can't wait to learn and soak up and really throw in where I can.
What's your deadlift record?
My deadlift record, 622.8 pounds. I set it last July at the national championships here in Las Vegas.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So there's a great gym here where they do powerlifting. I should take you
Yeah,
when you get here. If
they
that's
are
your
all over
thing,
the place. Yeah.
yeah, probably so.
So what I haven't told most people, and I know I'm cutting you off, so I actually competed at the national championship this past June. And I've retired. So I've retired from
You're done.
competition. Yeah. Look, one of the, you probably know this because you take your biking seriously, is what most people fail to understand about elite sports is that bodily injury is the norm.
Yeah.
And, dealing with injury after injury. Look, I just turned 44, I know some people consider me a youngin, but the injuries they stack up and,
Dude.
look, I'm at a point where I make a decision. Hey, I want to enjoy my long-term health. I've achieved so much in my sport. I love it. I love stepping onto that platform and having the cameras on me and the judges and the cheering and the screaming for me and lifting the weight, right? Win or lose. But, just like with everything else, hey, there's a time for transition.
Yep. No, I hear you. My wife and I raced triathlon. I think I raced for 10 years and she raced for 20.
Wow.
And
So you
when
do
we
know.
were done, we were done, and people
Yeah.
go, but wait,
One more.
you can still go. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I tell people it's more important for me to win at work and to win at home right now.
Hmm. Yeah.
When you, like you said, like an athlete, I don't know if it's an obsessive compulsive disorder. When I go in, man, I'm all in.
I
So
know.
it was eat, sleep, and train for a
Hmm.
number of years. And we did some cool things, but you're right. Once you're done, you're like, man, gosh, and I love training with those people. And
Hmm.
that's a lot of these guys that still ride around here. It's like being in a race with them anyway.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's too easy. Look, there are some people, it sounds like, you and me, Sam, are in this group where we have no off switch.
yeah,
It's
right.
either on or off. There's nothing in between. If that switch is flipped, we are all in.
And here we are on a Saturday
Yeah,
interviewing, and I couldn't
exactly.
wait.
I know,
I was like
Saturday.
so excited
Exactly.
to talk with you.
Yeah,
So that's
love it.
cool, man. I'm really happy for you. I've met a lady from Quorum within the last few weeks. I'm trying to, because they have like I think a buyer's pool or something. They
Yeah,
have a really cool solution. And I just haven't been able to line up
yeah,
with the guy to sign up for it. So
yeah,
it'd be interesting. Yeah, you should, you know,
yeah. I'll
introduce
give you
me
a
to it
quick.
once you're on board.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And additionally, look, education is huge. I think that's an aspect of even what excited me about coming on here is kind of talking about my journey and everything else. That's again something that excites me about Quorum. They put on over 300 events a year
Wow.
just to simply educate.
Wow.
So, I know I could beat a dead horse, but for me, I feel, and it's tough because I feel like, hey, I'm leaving 360 fantastic people at ITS. These phenomenal people. I actually got this shirt last year. We have about 150 people in the Philippines, and
Wow.
now for the last couple of years, Tom and I have gone out there to spend time with these folks and developed a relationship. And so I've shed a couple tears leaving. This is a tough decision. A lot of people have asked me, why are you leaving? And, sometimes it's just time to move on. And I think a lot of sometimes people feel that with their business, right?
Hmm.
They feel it in life and in different ways. And I think, look, I've learned, hey, when I get to a certain point, I'm going to respect that feeling within myself. I'm going to explore it, kind of check it out and look at it. And I'm like, okay, this is authentic. This is legitimate. It's not just a overnight feeling that dissipates, but I'm really going to do something here, and it's time for me to make a move. And I feel so lucky that I found such a fantastic group.
That's awesome, man. So we're coming up on an hour. So I've got one
Yeah,
question for you to
please.
help us, right? And as I think about Big Sur, we've been in Tampa Bay for my wife and I've been here for over 30 years. We've had our business for 25. We have just an amazing team. They just do
Mm,
such a good job. And what I found, because we're still, I would say a mid-sized MSP,
yeah.
and the great fit for us are the smaller ones that have small
Mm,
teams, very technical teams of like 3 or 4 people, and like you, they're like, I can't, or what you said earlier, I can't figure out the sales part, or I don't like it. I don't like the general
yeah.
management. I don't like the collections. I don't like the finance side,
Or the
and
hiring,
really
the
the leadership,
HR. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
HR.
Oh,
That's where I spend all my time, right? Is team development, and I love it. So that's the big invitation that we have, is that the locals MSPs can join us and join ranks. What are the big challenges for them? Like I see some of the younger ones that have, they if they're between 35 and 45 years old, they don't want to sell because they're hard charging,
yeah.
even if they're not growing. They're fully engaged in and they just like it. But I find that once they start to go to market, they've never been through the process. And it's
Yeah.
like, ugh, here we go. It's such a eye opener to them on how they're valued. And so what's the
Yeah.
recommendation for me? What's the recommendation for these local MSPs that might want to join Big Sur? What are the thoughts that come to mind?
So it sounds like you'd like to bring more of these partnerships together. Safe
Yeah,
statement.
it's been great for us. Absolutely.
I think that,
And it's been great for them.
I think so. I think my advice for Big Sur here is what we talked a little bit before is like you now have been through this process. Not admittedly from the seller side, but you've been on the buyer side. You've got 7 or 8 of these under your belt. Am I right? And I think what brings people together are stories, right? It's the stories about how they overcame the problems. And I think I think sometimes people focus too much on multiples, and everyone's biggest question is, what's my MSP worth, Adam, right? And everybody wants to know. But I think where we can really truly connect with somebody and start having a real relationship is when we start talking about those problems and how they were overcome and how Big Sur fixed this problem and this problem and this problem and this problem. One of the things we had done is create some case studies, right? That we looked at the partners and said, hey, here's what life was like before, during, and after joining ITS. I think those are phenomenally powerful.
Wow. Okay.
To sit down and interview that person, right? Or even if they're gone, kind of create the case study, right? Of like, hey, here's the problems that were encountered, and here's how it went. Here's how we help them overcome those problems, and here's how we differentiate ourselves. We're focused in Florida. Here's exactly what we're looking for. We have a playbook, right? Do we make mistakes? Of course, we're human, but here's what we're committed to, and here's how this connects to our core values. I think if you can connect those dots for people, it helps kind of cut through the mess, right? It helps cut through the noise. And then for the smaller folks that are out there, I get it, right? They're young, they got gas in the tank, the world's their oyster. Everybody thinks their baby's the cutest, right? We all want 10 million, right? For no matter how much we're making, right? At least 10 million. Yep. And I think that's part of the challenge, is connecting the dots of, hey, how can I make this financially viable for a person that they're not going to be able to retire, right? Kind of figuring out what is important to them and sitting back. And I think that you kind of illustrated for yourself, Sam. I think you do have a way of getting a sense of what's important to people and then helping call it out, right? And then, but in a way that lets them claim it. Like, you know what? Yeah, you're right. I should work with this organization more, right? Look, at the end of the day, it's a relationship. It's going to come down to communication with MSP owners. Be real with yourself, right? Be honest. Like, are you done, right? Have you really done everything that you believe you can? And if you can't, hey, let's figure out a plan, right? How can you get to the next level? But when you've tried everything and year after year, it's the same thing, and your business has been flat or just growing just a little bit, get real with yourself, and just sit down. Is this what you want out of life? Do you want to just grind? If so, great. If you don't, find somebody that you really connect with, that you can have a solid, meaningful relationship, and pursue it.
It's awesome, man. Thank you. Man, this has been great. That's the quickest hour of my whole week.
Yeah. Thank you, Sam. This was fantastic. I appreciate it's good to see you again, brother.
It's good to see you, man.
Yeah.
And you're coming in Tampa. Is it next week? 2 weeks?
I think it's the 9th. Yeah, December 9th.
9th, 10th, and 11th. Yeah. I'll look forward to seeing you then.
Yeah.
All right, man. Thanks for joining me today.
Hey, bye now. Talk soon. Bye.